Hi, everyone. I hope you are doing well and had a great weekend, enjoying some football if you watch. So I am here today to do some announcements and give you an overview, a little update for week 5. So first, I'm going to talk about our iCollege, what's going on there, then talk about some assignment updates for our research proposal, and then go over the feedback from weeks 3 and 4 with your perusals, and then give you the checklist for this week. So unfortunately, we are having an issue with our iCollege. Hopefully you saw the announcement that I posted in iCollege a Sunday morning. So I know I shared in the introductory video that this course was cross-listed with an undergraduate section. And so that was the section of our iCollege was both sections together. However, the student who was in the undergraduate section dropped the course. And so the Georgia State removed that section from the course catalog, which prompted iCollege to create a new section of the course and move all of you over from the previous section to a new section. So thank you so much for Stefan for letting me know Friday night, so I could try to take action to try to come up with a solution. So I've copied all the course material over so you can see all of the announcements, and the directions on what to read, the syllabus, all the documents. However, the previous assignments that you've submitted did not transfer over. So I have been on multiple phone calls this weekend with them, and they have escalated the ticket to administration. And so I'm expecting a call back this week to try to get the previous section we were all working in restored, along with the article that, or the your research topic question that you submitted, along with my feedback, restored. So we'll have everything. So if you're not seeing that, you have not done anything wrong. It's an iCollege issue. So hopefully we will get that resolved very quickly. And I am, very concerned and disappointed about it. So I apologize about the fact that we're having this issue. I know it's a little bit frustrating. So that is one part of the issue. And then the other part is the perusal. So perusal is connected to iCollege. So the perusal that we were using was connected to the old section. You still have access to it, but the link doesn't go exactly. So it looked like everyone so far has been able to access the perusal, to be able to see your classmates' comments. You can still see the lectures and everything. So hopefully we can figure that out. And then soon this week, I'll have information about getting the previous assignment updated. So I did go ahead and update your grades and everything, so you can see all of that. But do email me if you have any questions or need any help finding anything. So and just to show you, when I look at my iCollege, this is the previous section that we were working in. The XLS means cross-listed, but then they moved you all to this section. So I'm talking with them about getting the work restored from this section. So fingers crossed that is a seamless process and we will be back on track. So next thing I wanted to talk to you about is your research proposal assignment. Now, unfortunately, this is one of the things that we cannot see right now, is what you previously submitted for your research topic and the feedback that I gave. So that's the main thing that I want to try to find a way to get that restored so we can all be back on track with that. But for the research proposal, I see a lot of you in the perusal talking about what you're going to be doing for data collection, making connections to everything that we're reading, which is amazing. That's exactly what you should be doing. So we are going to have another ungraded check-in that's coming up, not for a while, in November, but I do want to talk to you a little bit about it for those of you who are already thinking about that, and give you some tips on how you can start working on it piece by piece now. So that way the project is much more manageable by the end. So most of you have decided a research issue in question. Some of you had two, and I gave you feedback on which one I thought had the most potential to be the best project for you to do for this one. So on your November feedback, there is a template and an example available in iCollege. I'm going to show you that in a moment. And so for that check-in, you'll have your final research issue and question. You'll talk about your potential design, whether it's quantitative, qualitative, mixed, and then your data collection procedures. Along with 3 potential references. So as you can see, a lot of this is what we've been reading about right now, like your data collection. We've read a little bit about design, and as we continue to read this week, you'll be able to drop in some things. So when you look at iCollege, when you go to the assignment tab, you will see this second check-in right here. So when you view that assignment, you will see I have a template here, a sample, and then a video tutorial that you can look at for accessing articles. I'm going to go ahead and show you what the template looks like. Maybe I'll show you a different way. Let me show you. Pause for just a moment. Okay, when you click on the template, it will download the template as a Word doc onto your computer. I'm just showing you a Google Drive version so you can, I don't have to switch the screens that I'm sharing. So this is the template for the title page. This is using APA style. We will read about that. That's the last chapter in Perusal that we'll read, but this is already formatted in APA style. So you'll just put in your name and your paper title, the date. Now, these are the components that go along with the rubric that I'll be using to grade you for your research proposal assignment. So your introduction, here's where you will introduce your research topic. So this is what you already submitted to me, but just expanded upon into 2 to 3 paragraphs to talk about what the research issue is that you're interested in studying. The prior literature is when you discuss 3 to 5 relevant peer-reviewed research articles about the topic. And this is a video tutorial on how to search for those articles. For the check-in in November, you will just submit the citation for those, or if you want to go ahead and write the summary, you can as well. Your research question, which you've already submitted, so you can drop that in here. And then the statement of purpose, talk about the study's intent or objectives, and then the significance, and if it's quantitative or mixed methods, your hypothesis. Now, in the method section, here's where you'll talk about the overall approach to design, be it quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods. So that's something that we've been reading about, and you'll see on the template that I'm telling you what chapter to refer to for where to get the information for that section. The research design that we will be reading about in the coming weeks, you can see that's coming up. So once we get to those lectures, you'll be able to come back and drop something in. The research setting, a paragraph talking about where you're proposing that your research would take place. If it's in a school, tell me about the school. If it's in a university, tell me about that. The context, the setting of the study. Participants. This is what we're going to be reading about this week in chapter 10 and 11, sampling. So here you will talk about how you will choose your participants and who you will recruit, what type of participants you are looking for your study. And then this connects a lot to our city training, everything that you learned there. Instruments, that's what we read about last week in chapter 8. 7 and 8 about measures, and then data sources as well. So instruments and data sources. So this is something too that you can be working on now. Even if you don't write it out as paragraphs, you might just jot down if you're doing interviews, if you are using archival data. I'm seeing all of your comments in Perusal. You might as well just download the template now and start dropping in what you know and filling it out as you go along. Then your data collection procedures, data analysis, we will get to that in the later weeks, and then your references with your scholarly articles. So this is the template, and it is available to you now in iCollege. So you can go ahead, again, if you need to find this, I'll put the link in the announcements too, but under assessments, you go to assignments, and you will see them here. And this second check-in when you click on that assignment, you will see the sample, you'll see the template where you can start dropping in your data sources or other things that you know as you are making these connections as you are doing your reading. So those are the next steps for your research proposal assignment, but continue to make connections with the lecture and in the perusal to help you refine your thinking and get feedback from me and everyone else about the choices that you are making for your research design. And I'll be continuing to talk about this as we get closer and closer to make sure that you feel like you have all the information that you need to really craft a really solid research design proposal. So thinking back to our reading, I didn't do a feedback video last week. So thinking back to chapters 4 and 5, these are some of the main concepts I want to make sure that you understand. And as we look forward to the midterm coming up in a couple of weeks, these are some of the really core concepts that want to make sure that we're reviewing and coming back to. So quantitative research being confirmatory, deductive, where you state a hypothesis and you collect data to test the hypothesis. There was some great comments about this in this week's perusal, particularly about analyzing secondary data. There's a difference between collecting data and conducting research. So we collect data in our society all the time. I made this comment in perusal, with our phones. Our digital footprint is huge. And so there is an abundance of data about us. However, most of that data is not analyzed as empirical research. In order for it to be quantitative research, it's not just quantitative data, it's quantitative data that is collected and then tested using statistical hypothesis testing in order to understand the relationship between variables. And as you're reading the chapters that we are reading last week and this week, 7, 8, 9 is optional, 10 and 11, they're incorporating aspects that are applicable to quantitative, qualitative, and mixed research. So you should be, again, coming back to these concepts and seeing what sampling looks like in quantitative design and qualitative design. What do data sources look like in quantitative versus qualitative design, and so on and so forth. So these are the large buckets, and then everything that we're reading fits within here. So if you have a quantitative design, you have an appropriate data collection that will match that. You have an appropriate sampling technique that will match that, and same for qualitative. And qualitative being inductive, exploratory, it's focused on making observations, looking for patterns and conclusions about those patterns. And then also thinking about the purpose of research, and that was also on the template for the research design. What is the purpose and how does your design support that purpose? So one common purpose is to describe. This can be achieved with either qualitative or quantitative or mixed research. But it is non-experimental. Research can also predict. And when it's predicting, then you are using quantitative design because you are looking at the correlation or the relationship or using a regression to predict how one variable will affect the other. Identifying causes. So this would be experimental design. We'll go into depth about that in several weeks. This would be quantitative to establish cause and effect relationships. Think about studies with control groups in order to really isolate the variables and show the directionality and not just correlation. And then some research studies, the purpose is to explain. This could, again, be qualitative or quantitative or mixed design. So these are also some of the things to be thinking about as you are thinking about your research proposal and understanding the concepts that we're reading about. So great job on your city training. I did go ahead and review those. So you should see that updated in your grade for the assignment. I know that it can be a bit tedious to get through those 12 modules, but I really enjoyed hearing all the positive feedback and perusal and all the connections that you are making about the concepts raised with the city training, as well as chapter 6 about research ethics and the studies that I shared. And a lot of the issues there. And I really appreciate all of your discussion, continuing to tie in research ethics throughout each chapter that we read. That's so important. That was one of the main ideas of chapter 6, is that how participants are treated is the most important ethical issue in research. They're all important, but that one is paramount. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about institutional review boards. There were some great questions and perusal about how review boards are chosen. They're chosen by the university, and then they are appointed, and each university has their own set of guidelines for how many members, at least 5 typically, and it needs to be composed representing different disciplines and areas of expertise and different requirements in order to establish that. Those of you who work in schools, for instance, if you were interested in using Atlanta Public Schools as your research site, Atlanta Public Schools also has their own process for reviewing research and either in granting those site letters that you have to have. So there are multiple layers to try to make sure that participants are being treated with those principles that we reviewed. Informed consent, I wanted to show you what an informed consent form looked like. This one is, I believe, from my dissertation. So you can see here that this is what it will look like when it is approved. It has to be stamped with the IRB to be approved. And a lot of the things that you are mentioning, the benefits have to outweigh the risks, of course. This voluntary participation and withdrawal, issues related to confidentiality, keeping your records private, and being very clear about what it will look like. This one was a little bit different than some of the ones that you might have read about that use pseudonyms. This study used participants' actual name, but that was disclosed as part of the IRB. So this is just an example of what an IRB form looks like, but a lot of great discussion about passive consent, and then also assent when you are conducting research with children. There was also some good questions about the debriefing, dehoaxing, desensitizing. So I created this little visual to help you conceptualize how they are in relation to each other. So debriefing is a research method that happens after data collection. So there are 2 types of debriefing that we learned about. One type of debriefing is dehoaxing, and another type is desensitizing. So these are both methods that are like subtypes of debriefing that you can include in your research design. So dehoaxing would happen after data collection in a study that includes deception. There was also a great discussion about deception. So if deception was used, this dehoaxing would be the debriefing method used to talk to participants about that when appropriate and tell them what the real purpose of the study was. There was some great comments in the perusal about why studies might use deception. Deception is used when it and this also came up too in the data collection chapter that we had last week. Oftentimes, if people know that they are being observed or they know what the researcher is looking for, that affects our behavior. And so deception can be used so that participants are not influenced by knowing. I think the example I gave in the perusal was if you were looking at biases that a teacher has in terms of which students they call on most frequently in terms of race and gender. If I'm the teacher and you tell me, hey, we want to see, are you calling on the white children more? I'm going to be very aware of that. and probably not do what I would normally do, versus if you say, I want to see how you engage students in dialogue in the classroom. So that would be an example of deception. And then afterwards, you might share with me what you were looking for. And this study also, if that one I was talking about, would be a great time to also do some desensitizing and maybe even give me some techniques and some suggestions and be like, hey, here's what we noticed. Here's some tips that you could do to try to decrease any bias that we noticed in your teaching. So that is a little discussion about de-hoaxing and desensitizing and when that can be used. So, again, desensitizing can be, there was some great discussion about that too, because oftentimes, not oftentimes, but sometimes studies, I say this, I think I can say this. I saw a proposal for a paper that was looking at how anxiety around performances could affect music students. And so they wanted to talk to students about that. And so while I think that there's great value in that study, it is important to think about the desensitizing that might be necessary if some students, like, talking about anxiety does bring up uncomfortable feelings that they need to talk about further after the study. So that would be an instance of how to do that. And IRBs, their job is to review the studies and make sure that researchers are taking great care in making sure that participants are supported and protected. Research ethics, I think I have been saying this too, the city training, the IRB is the baseline for ethics, but the researcher themselves, they should go above and beyond that in a way that it honors what they believe. So the city trained, the IRB, that's the base level, but you are able to add on more. So if it's something that you don't think is ethical, that's perfectly fine to explain that in your research proposal. I won't be doing this because instead I'll be using this method to talk about your research ethics, and that also is in your research proposal as well. Okay, so let me go over the multiple choice questions for research ethics. Oh, and since we are having kind of a few snafus with perusal, so when you click the link to an assignment, it will look like this. But if you want to navigate to other discussions that we've had, you can go to course home over here on the left, course home, and then here you will see a list of the assignments. You won't see all of them like I do, but you will see the ones that we've done so far. So you'll be able to see 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So going back to perusal number 3, let's talk about the multiple choice that we had here. Okay, so generally, and this is like from an IRB standpoint, a study is considered ethical if the benefits outweigh the costs, or like the harm, not financial costs, but the harm to participants. And then research involving people or human participants at institutions or universities is reviewed by the Institutional Review Board. I talked a little bit about that. Although research misconduct is an important ethical issue, and this is related to what we read about plagiarizing and citing sources, a researcher's most fundamental ethical concern should be the treatment of the research participants. If you conducted a research study, which you have followed, and you followed a procedure ensuring that the identity of the research participants cannot be identified by anyone, you have ensured confidentiality. And I know that that was something else in the chapter, is the difference between privacy, confidentiality, and anonymity. Anonymity is when the researcher does not know who the participant is. They have the data, but they cannot connect it to a person. If there's confidentiality, the researcher does know who the participant is, but they have measures in place and methods in place to make sure that the data cannot be connected back to that person once the data is published and in their keeping their privacy in like a password protected file or stored in a way that it couldn't be accessed. And that is privacy, is controlling other people's access to private information about person. Misleading or withholding information is known as deception. And again, I know that that has a negative connotation, but and it has been used for nefarious reasons before. We read about those. But deception can also be used when telling the participant what you're looking for can undermine getting a view of someone in their natural state. So it can affect the data collected if you tell them what you're looking for, because that makes people change how they act when they know that you're looking for something in particular. Like me, let's say that you were saying, I want to see how many times you blink in this lecture, or say like, I'm going to be self-conscious about it and either blinking more, saying like more, or pausing, versus if you just said, oh, I want to look at how you use video to communicate to your students, and then you count the likes or blinks or something like that. There's no purpose to that study, but for instance. So this question was about after data collection. So this researcher, they finished collecting the data and they are going to explain that they didn't tell the whole truth, and they asked if they had any more questions. So since this is related to not telling the whole truth, that would be an example of it is debriefing. And then asking if they have any questions too, it is debriefing, and then that particular example is de-hoaxing, since deception was used. So here you can say it was de-hoaxing, which is a type of debriefing, and then asking if there's any questions, that would go with debriefing. So here the nurse has agreed to participate in a study, and they agree to participate, but then later decides that they don't want to, they feel uncomfortable. And so here, they might feel that it was coercive because the nurse works for the doctor. And so it makes it an ethical issue when they want to withdraw, because it's a complicated like relationship in terms of a conflict of interest and the power dynamics. And that was something else that there have been great comments with in the perusal about making sure that the relationship, like teacher versus student, or instructional coach and teacher, principal versus teacher, that how do you keep it ethical when you have a relationship like that, and what can you do to make sure that people don't feel coerced to participate when there is a relationship like that. Okay, so chapter 7 and 8 were from the part 3 of our text, Foundations of Research. So these, like I mentioned, these foundations for chapter 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, they have details that can go with quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods. So chapter 7 is standardized measurement and assessment. That one is quantitative and mixed method, but then methods of data collection. So chapter 7 was talking about the standardized measurements that are used. So MAP testing, Georgia milestones, ACT, SAT, those type of measures. And then there's also other batteries that are often used in education and psychology, standardized measurements to measure a construct. So it talked about the assumptions with that, how reliability and validity are established, what they mean, and some of the issues that can come up with it. And then chapter 8 was all about methods of data collection. And this is so important because you are going to need to talk about that in your research proposal. Here's the template. So, and if you already know what your data collection methods are, you can write them down here. Instruments is like if you're using a survey or an interview protocol, you can write that here, and data sources would be exactly what it is you're using. Okay, so let's take a look at, so the main things that I want to make sure that you know are the difference between reliability and validity, and then also the main data collection methods. So let's take a look at that perusal number 4. So scales in here, assumptions. Okay. So a type of secondary or existing data would be archived research data. Great discussion and feedback about the 2 studies that I talked about to show you some examples of what some different data collection could look like. So archived research and data is really commonly used. Like I mentioned, we have so much data in our society available to us in education. Students are taking tests all the time. So we have all of that data, climate surveys, data like that. And so if you do an analysis using some of that existing data, that could be used in there. Or it could be something even older that's not included there. But existing or secondary data is anything that you use that you're not asking participants to do as part of your study. So since students are already taking map testing, that would be a type of existing data because it's already happening regardless of whether or not you're doing this study. But if you create your own survey with students where they talk about, if you've designed your own intervention to support students in like maybe you are using doing research about a critical literacy unit. And so you have all these critical literacy lessons for students and you're teaching them how to do that. And then at the end, you give them a survey about how they felt about learning in that way. That survey would be something that they're doing only during the research. So that's not an example. So again, these are examples of things that you could be writing in this part of the research proposal template. On a nomial scale. So this is things that are not quantitative: age, gender, race, so many different constructs that are categorical. That is on a nomial scale. So the consistency or the stability of test scores, that's reliable. Does the measure give you the same results every single time? And in education, I know that teachers, sometimes we try to make our own assessments. So some of these concepts are related to ideas that we do. However, Chapter 7 talked about the statistical tests that are done to ensure it. Now, if we're saying validity is saying that all of the evidence supports the inferences made from and about the test. So that validity is measuring what it claims to be measuring. And there was also some great discussion about this and some of the assumptions that you have to have to buy into the validity of a particular test, intelligence test, IQ test, ACT test. So there is some debate about that. Really good discussion. And then when you are looking at the correlation coefficient to determine the reliability of a measure, you're looking for a coefficient that is greater than or equal to 0.7. So those were the multiple choice questions for this week's perusal. Again, if you wanted to search through to read through any of my answers to questions, I'll continue to add those there to answer those. Okay, so on to our checklist for the week. So this week we are going to be reading chapters 10 and 11. Chapter 9 is optional. I also have a separate lecture about that. I'll link that in the announcements if you want to watch that. So chapter 9 and 11. Oh, thanks. Okay, chapter 9 and 11 Chapter 9 is about a questionnaire and how to construct a questionnaire. And then in my lecture, I show you how to search for existing questionnaires. If you might need something like that for your research proposal. Chapter 10 is super important because it's about sampling. And sampling is about how the methods that you will use to choose your participants. So the details that you get from that chapter, you will put here in the participant section. You will talk about the methods that you will use, the sampling methods that you will use. And in that chapter, they talk about methods for all different designs, quantitative, qualitative, and mixed research. And then chapter 11 is validity in your research. So chapter 7 talked about using an existing measure, a test, think ACT, SAT, MAPS, Georgia milestones, using one of those. When the writers of those measures, they do their own validity and reliability of that measure. However, in all research, when you are planning research design, you need to plan in methods to help you establish the validity of your findings. So chapter 11 is going to talk to you about some methods that you can include in your research design to help you establish that the findings that you claim after you've analyzed your data reflect what's actually happening. And so the details from chapter 11, the methods in chapter 11, will go in your data analysis section. So you see right here, discuss methods to ensure reliability and validity. So as you're reading that chapter this week, chapter 10, that will go under the participant subtitle. Chapter 11 will go under data analysis. You might want to have the template open and just drop in your notes and ideas of what you are thinking that you will do for your research proposal, or in the comments and perusal as I ask questions during the lecture. So that is what we are reading about this week and how it fits into the larger picture, being able to write a research proposal. So perusal 5, we'll have that. I'll have the link. We are going to have an optional Zoom October 5th. This is going to be a really important one because it's going to be studying for the midterm. So if you're able to make it to that Zoom, I do strongly suggest that you come. The whole week that week, I'll have a review lecture and a review perusal to make sure that you're ready for the midterm. But a lot of people find it really helpful if they can come to that Zoom. Just to ask me any questions. I can quiz you a little bit and help you make sure that you are on track for the midterm. And I'll be talking about that as we get closer. And then we do have our article critique assignment coming up in over a month, but I'll be talking about that as well. And then your research proposal check-in. So hopefully I've influenced you to download the proposal and start filling in, just jotting down, even if it's bullet points, ideas of what you're thinking now. So you can do it piece by piece. And then also, as soon as I have information about iCollege and getting our previous assignment restored, I will let you know. So email me if you have any questions or need any help with anything, and keep on with your excellent participation in perusal, and I will keep answering your questions there. Bye.